Are you still using same old school HTML input field? If yes, then let's create 5 different input fields with cool animations. First of all, we'll create 4 different material design input fields with different animations, and at the end of this video, we'll build same design of Google sign-in input field. Without further ado, let's start. Hello and namaste everyone, this is Jitsaru with Coding Design. Welcome to our channel. If you are new here, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's create index.html file. Inside that, if I type exclamation sign and hit that tab button, then you'll get this basic HTML code. For the title, I am giving 5 cool custom input field animation with pure CSS. Now within the body tag, let's create form element. Within that, I am creating div with class name input group. And now let's create input element with type text. For the name and ID attribute, I am giving value name. Similarly, let's create label. For attribute, I'm giving the same value that I have given for ID. So let's give the same name. Now for label, I'm writing username, and just below that, let's create span tag with class name border. With the help of this span tag, we'll create bottom line where we'll give different animations. Similarly, let's create the input field. For that, you can select this code and duplicate it. Let's change that input type to password. And also I'm changing this all name value to password. And also let's change that username to password. Now with the help of live server extension, let's open this index.html file in our default browser. As you can see, this is the result. Now it's time to create style.css file. Just below the title tag, let's give the link for our style.css file. Now within the style.css file, in order to prevent browser's default margin and padding, for the universal selector, I am giving margin and padding of 0. Similarly, in order to include all the padding, border, value within our width and height, I am giving box sizing to border box. And also for the font family, let's give sans serif. Now let's style the body tag. For the body, I am giving minimum height of 100 px. For this video, I'm going to use this color everywhere. For that, within the root pseudo class, I'm declaring primary CSS variable, and let's give this dark bluish color. Now we'll give the same primary color for our body tag. So for the background color, I'm giving the same primary variable, and display to flex. Justify content to center. That will help you to bring your content horizontally center, and in order to bring vertically center, I'm giving align items to center. Now let's style this div with class name input group. So for the class input group, let's give margin top and bottom to 2 rem. For the left and right, 0. Now we can style the input tag that is within our div with class name input group. So for the input element, let's give the width of 100%. For the class input group, if I give width of 22 rem, you can see that input element, it will occupy whole that 22 rem. Similarly, let's give the padding of 1 rem. And if you type any text, you can see you will get a bit small font size. So let's give the font size of 1.1 rem. And also you can see you will be able to get that border. And also when you focus these input elements, you will be able to get that outlines. So in order to prevent that, I'm giving border and outline to none. And also I want to give background color. For the background color, I'm giving the same primary variable where I have stored that dark bluish color. And for the text color, let's give this white color. As you know, we are creating 2 different input fields which are material design based and Google sign-in form. So let's give specific class name. Okay, for this div with class name input group, I'm giving type MD. That MD, it represents material design. So now for the class input group that has class type MD, be careful, there is no any kind of white space because we are targeting the div with class name input group that has class name type MD. And we are selecting input element. So for that input, let's give border bottom. I'm giving width of 0.05 rem. For the border style, let's give solid. For the color, let's give white color. Now you can see you will be able to get that white border at bottom, but there is some problem. For input elements, we have gave their padding of 1 rem. Because of that, there is extra space. In order to prevent that, for our material design input field, I'm giving their padding left of 0. Okay, now this is perfect. Now it's time to style our label element. So that label element, okay. So now for the label that is within our div with class name input group, I'm giving text color to white. For the font size, I'm giving 1.1 rem. And also let's give position of absolute. As you know, our label's parent element, that is our div with class name input group. So for the class input group, let's give position of relative. And now for that label, I'm giving top to 50%. And if I give transform translate y to -50%, then you'll be able to bring your label element vertically center. Now for our material design label element, and now you can duplicate this same code and bring it down there. Instead of that input, let's give label. Let's bring it to left. Let's give the left value to 0. Now you can see whenever you are giving specific value for your input field's value as well as your label elements text, they both are overlapping or they are intersecting. In order to prevent that, let's give class input group. Whenever you focus our input field at the time, let's give their plus label.
What?
If you ask me why am I giving their plus, as you can see, our input field's first sibling element, that is our label element. So we are targeting that label element, okay, with the help of that plus. Now for that label element, let's give top to 5%. For our text color, I'm giving shine. And also I'm going to change font size. I'm giving 0.8 rem. Now you can see whenever you focus your input field, you will be able to take your label element at top position, but there is no any transition. So for that, for our label element, let's give the transition. For the transition duration, I'm giving 0.2 second. For the timing function, let's give is in out. Now in your browser, you can see you will be able to get that smooth transition, and which looks pretty cool. But again, we are facing another problem. Whenever you are out of focus, I mean when you click outside of your input field, we'll face same text overlapping problem. So in order to prevent that, for these input elements, you can give required attribute. Now with the help of that attribute, you can duplicate the same code and let's give their comma, and instead of that focus pseudo class, now you will be able to give their pseudo class valid because we have used their required keyword. And now with the help of this technique, now we can solve that text overlapping problem. So now you can see whenever you give any specific value, you won't get that text overlapping problem. And also you can duplicate the same code and bring it down there. Now for that input element, I want to give their not pseudo class. So now with the help of that not pseudo class, I'm trying to give different color for our labels text color when you are out of focus. Okay, now you can duplicate that same color code and bring it down there. Let's change that cyan color to this gray color. Now you can see when you are out of focus, you will be able to get that gray text color. And also whenever you are focusing your specific input field at that time, I want to change that bottom white line to same cyan color. For that, we can select our span tag with class name border. So for the class border that is within our div with class name input group, I'm giving height of 0.1 rem. For the width, let's give 100%. And also for the background color, I'm giving shine. And also let's give position of absolute. As you can see, these lines are not in proper position, so let's bring it to the proper position. And be careful, our span tag with class name borders parent element, that is our div with class name input group. So I have already given the position of relative for our div with class name input group. Now for the class border, let's give the left value to 0 and let's bring it to the bottom. So I'm giving bottom to 0. And initially for the transform, I'm giving scale x to 0. And now you can duplicate this same code and bring it down there. Instead of that label, let's give class border, but I want to give only for our class type material design. So you can give their dot type MD. And also now you can duplicate that same transform code and bring it down there. And instead of that scale x to 0, I'm giving 1. And if I click within this input fields, okay, there is no any changes. I think I have done some mistake. Our input elements first sibling element, that is our label element, but we are targeting our span tag with class name border, which was not the first sibling element of our input element. So now instead of that plus, you can give this tilde symbol in your keyboard just above the tab button or next to number 1 key. If you press shift and if you press that button, you'll be able to get this symbol. And in your browser, if you click that specific input field, you will be able to get that sky blue line. If you just want this effect, you don't need to give this transform. Instead, you can give opacity, but I want to take this animation further, and as you can see, we are changing that transform scales value. So in order to give that smooth transition, let's give the transition for our class border. Now we can duplicate the same transition code and bring it down there, and I want to change that transition duration to 0.3 seconds. Now in your browser, did you see that? You'll be able to get that cool animation, and our animation, it starts from the center. So if you like this animation, you can keep as it is, but I want to give you two more different animation. By default, that transform origins value, that is center. So if I change that transform origin to left, now you can see you'll be able to get that animation from your left to right. Let's duplicate the same code and you can comment out that left, and let's change that transform origin to right. Now you will be able to get just opposite of that same animation. That means we are getting the sky blue line that animates from right to left. Okay, so I did give you 4 different input field animations, and all these animations, they are the part of material design. So this was all about material design's input field, and now let's create Google's sign-in input field. So for that, you can copy the same code and let's comment out just bottom there. Let's paste it. Let's change that class type material design to Google, and you can select this code and duplicate it. Let's change that input type password as well as all the password value to something like email, and for that label value, let's give email or phone. And for our Google's input field, we don't need this span tag with class name border, so you can remove all these span tag. Now we need to style that specific class input group along with class type Google. For that, you can select this code and duplicate it, and let's change that class type MD to type Google. And now we don't need that padding value, let's remove that. And also I don't want to give just border bottom, so let's remove that bottom, and also let's give some rounded corners. For that, I'm giving border radius of 0.4 rem. Now when you focus your input field, at that time I want to change that border of input field. For that, once again, you can duplicate the same code and bring it down there. So when you focus that Google's type input field, at that time you can duplicate the same border code and bring it down there, and I want to change that border width to 0.1 rem, and for the border color, let's keep cyan. Now when you focus your input field, did you see that? You will be able to change that border of your input field, and also our label that is taken to right side. For our material designs label element, we have given their left of 0. So now if I select this code and duplicate it, let's change that type MD to Google. Now for the Google type label element, instead of that left to 0, let's give 0.5 rem. Now you can see when you focus your input field, you'll be able to take your label element at top. All these animation were given when we are creating material designs input field. So now for our label element, you can give padding of 0.4 rem, and also when you focus that input field, at the time for our label element, instead of that top 5%, let's give 4%. Although our label elements, they are taken to top, but they are intersecting with our border. So in order to prevent that, for our label element, you can give background color. I'm giving the same CSS variable primary. Now in your browser, did you see that? We did create exact Google sign-in input field, but you can see when you give any specific value for our email input field, when you are out of focus, you will be able to get that label text at the center of your input field. Input field with type email, it will take specific patterns. So this value is invalid. Because of that, we are facing this problem.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
But in order to solve this problem, there is another trick. Now for the input with type email, if I give placeholder, something like this, it will take this kind of pattern. And as you have used their pseudo class valid, so now it is not properly applied for our input field. Now for all the input fields, I'm giving their placeholder, and be careful, for this placeholder I'm giving their single white space. If you give no any value, then it won't work, so at least you need to give white space. Now with the help of this placeholder attribute, you can duplicate the same code, and instead of that pseudo class focus, first of all let's wrap it within our pseudo class not, and instead of that focus, let's give placeholder shown. Combination of this placeholder pseudo class and not pseudo class, we are making sure that if there is no any value within our placeholder, then we'll execute these codes. Okay, so it's a pretty powerful technique. I know it's rarely used, but when you use it, it's really helpful. Okay, so in our browser, once again, if you give any specific value, if you are out of focus, then now you won't be able to get that text overlapping effect. Now how about uncommenting this material design input fields? By pressing F11 key, let's take our browser to the full screen. Now let's keep some gap. Okay, So for our body, as you can see, I have used their display to flex. So I'm giving gap of 2 rem. I think we need to give there 3 rem. Now you can see this beautiful input fields. But again, there is another problem. For our multiple designs input field, although we are not focusing that input field, our label text, they are taken to top, but we don't want that. Okay, so the root cause of our problem, that was all because of this code. So in order to prevent that, now we need to give that same placeholder. So for our all material designs input field, I'm giving that same placeholder with single white space. Now once again in our browser, now you won't get that same problem. So yeah, all the input fields, they are working perfectly fine. So we did learn some rarely used as well as underrated CSS pseudo class. What do you think about this input field animation? Let me know in the comment box. And also if you have new creative ideas, then let me know in the comment box. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did learn something, smash that like button. If you have any kind of queries, let me know in the comment box. Share this video if you think someone needs it. And also, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell icon. Remember, there is always more to learn, so keep learning.